So, welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Adelia, and I'm part of the digital sales and marketing team at OpenHR. First of all, for everyone who's listening, thank you very much for joining. I'm sure you won't regret listening to this because we have such an amazing speakers today. Jeff and Max are experts with extensive experience in AI and people analytics, and they will be discussing how technology is transforming HR and why integrating these innovations is crucial for your company's success. So before we start, I'd like to cover a few important details. This webinar is being recorded and we'll be sharing it to your social media and email. So feel free to share with your friends and colleagues. And if you haven't already, make sure to follow us to stay updated on future content like this. Also, we will have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar, so please leave your comments with your questions, and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. Now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. First, we have Jeff Wellstead, who has 20 years of experience in transforming HR through technology. He's the founder and CEO of Big Bear Partners, a consultancy firm specializing in HR and technology landscape. And then we have Max Blumberg, an expert in generative AI, people analytics, and business performance. He has collaborated with high-profile clients like NASDAQ, BBC, Lloyd's Register, and many others. So guys, I truly appreciate your time and participation today. Thank you all for being here.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Great. So first, I'd love to hear about how your journeys began. You both come from different backgrounds, and I know that life can take unexpected turns, but what made you decide to focus on AI and people analytics within the human resources sector?
I'll go first because Max is going to blow me out of the water, and it's never a good idea to follow Max.
I doubt it.
My particular journey, I've got a total of 35 years of experience, believe it or not, in human resources. The first half of which I basically spent in and around New York City with big global headquartered companies in investment banking and consulting and pharma, technology. And it was a very, very different world then. I entered human resources because I wanted to have a couple of things. One is a lot of contact with exciting and super smart people. But importantly, I wanted to kind of help people reach their own potential through the kind of lens of work, and therefore create incredible work environments and so forth. And perfectly honest, the first half of my career was not that. It was very much around quarterly profits. It was around sweating the human asset and trying to see how quickly we could get to financial target, typically regardless of whether or not we kind of brought people with us or frankly left people behind. My last 20 years has been working with hypergrowth tech and biotech companies, basically building HR and people strategy from scratch, which has been phenomenal because now you can kind of bring a lot of excitement and vision and best practice and all sorts of creative ideas to the fore. But to do this at scale requires a lot of HR technologies. And it's really then critical to basically, if in fact you're going to realize the ability to scale, to automate, delegate and democratize technologies to help enable an incredible, employee experience, whilst also helping the HR teams and the C-suite really kind of understand, what the big picture is in terms of their most expensive and precious asset. You need basically to kind of engage with tools that frankly are kind of like AI driven as much as anything else to really kind of do these three-dimensional analyses. So I get super excited about the utilization of HR technologies in this space, and AI has been for me an absolute dream. So I'm thrilled to kind of be here and talk more about that stuff, and I'll hand it over to Max.
Thanks, Jeff. That is certainly a rich career, and I suppose when you get past a certain age, one collects stories, as certainly I do. I was probably the one that worried my parents the most because I had no idea what I wanted to do if I grew up, rather than when I grew up. So I started out with electrical engineering, and there was a heavy mathematical component to that. But quickly moved into computer science. Now, of course, in those days, there was no idea of something like people analytics. And so I was doing this for the love. I think I probably dreamed of myself being an engineer of some sort. But when I found computers and even AI back then, over 20 years ago, I realized that this was something I was passionate about. However, I then had a technology company, which figures quite importantly, of my own, a startup, which grew very big, and which I sold. But that taught me something really important. It taught me to understand that when you are going to do interventions and activities like recruitment or learning and development or succession planning in my own company, you have to make sure that these are going to have an effect on the bottom line, because when you're a small organization, you haven't got money to waste on bad recruitment, on bad L&D. And of course, the same if you are a huge company, if you are Procter and Gamble or Coca-Cola, etc., you have much the same kind of issue. Anyway, when I sold the company, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I love learning new things. So I've kind of got this mathematical and computer science background. So I then did a PhD in psychology, and that was brand new for me. I've always been interested in the mind, and maybe the connection to AI was interesting. And it was the end of my PhD, a guy called Steve Langhorne from a very large global company called Rent-A-Kill Initial approached me. And Steve said, Max, he was head of HR in the UK. And he said, we're having a problem with our sales force. Can you help? I said, what do I know about sales forces? I'm a technology founder. I'm a computer scientist. I'm a geek. What can I do? And he said, you're a psychologist. You understand statistics. Come and have a look. And so I had a look, and that was 2013, 2000 and even earlier, 2011, before the term people analytics had really been invented. And I started using techniques that are in use today. I treated it like a research problem. I said, well, what's the business issue that we have to solve? Namely, why is there so much variability in the sales around the world? I tracked it down to a recruitment problem in this particular instance. I then created some interventions to redesign the recruitment process using scientific methods, which is what we call a part of people analytics today. And that's how I accidentally fell into people analytics, because some guy, when I finished my PhD, asked me if I could help them with a problem, and he happened to be in HR. He might have been in finance or in marketing, or he might have been from NASA. In that case, I would be doing space agency work. So it's funny how one's life ends up in these strange places.
Yeah, that's what I said before, that life can take really unexpected turns. So we were actually talking between us, the audience, that I think that they must know too, and is that you recognized people analytics and AI before. So building on that, how do you see these technologies giving an organization a competitive edge today, like comparing from the past?
Yeah, I'll just kind of jump in really quickly. Look, I mean, AI is exciting and wonderful, and for those of us who have been playing with it, the generative AI stuff, OpenAI and Anthropic's Claude and the Google models and all sorts of things, it's fun, right? It's interesting, it's fun. I've used it a lot professionally from a consultancy perspective. It's a great way to generate fascinating content and to kind of get your brain flipping over and thinking about things. But the advent of AI, generative AI, and other aspects like machine learning and so forth, being now kind of built into HR technologies, is taking things to a whole different level, and helping us solve problems that we thought were so complicated and so difficult, with the amount of the sheer amount of data required to kind of get there. That it's now kind of taking us down different roads that frankly we hadn't considered before. And a particular use case that I love talking about, especially for the HR function, who is often completely overwhelmed with typical day-to-day HR help desk, types of questions and inquiries, employee relations issues, compliance and governance problems, data updating and so forth, and report management. It feels like it's low level, and there's so much more that obviously a human resource function can be providing the organization. So now look, they've got chatbots for that stuff, right? You can upload your entire employee handbook, all your policies, policies, all the things you need to know about working in a particular company, and also basically still have access to the entirety of the corpus of the internet, and basically build a chatbot and just put that out there for everybody to utilize 24/7, which is great. And that potentially then gives you the headspace to start to focus on the next layer up strategically, which is, what do I know about my workforce, right? What do I know from a skills perspective and a competency perspective? Who knows what about what, at what level of proficiency? And how do I start creating sort of three-dimensional maps, not just for me in HR or for our leadership to kind of look at from a metadata perspective, but also for the employees in terms of giving them agency, giving them control, giving them a way forward. And how do I kind of create a much more enriching and sense of control, enriching environment around that, which creates wonderful, kind of side effects, which is like lowering retention or lowering attrition, rather, increasing retention, really kind of engaging people to kind of achieve their true level of potential, which is phenomenal. It frees up line managers to have much more intelligent discussions as a coach, basically to kind of help kind of people find the right paths. And again, at a metadata level, collecting total talent inventory insights and building three-dimensional maps about the entirety of your organization has massive commercial value in terms of what direction are we headed as a company? How are we going to hit sales targets? What are we going to do about sunsetting these products and building out instead these products? How are we going to shift in markets? Well, now we potentially have all this data available through the use of AI-driven tools to basically take us on that journey in a very, a very credible way. So AI is in fact changing the very nature of HR and its relationship, if you will, to the information, the mountain of information that it sits on, and helps making sense of it. But Max, what are your thoughts?
Well, I would love this to be a discussion, actually, because you raise so many interesting points. Adelia, I don't know if it's possible to get
feel
both
free, go ahead.
If you can get both our pictures, and I can watch Jeff's face as he
yes, you can go ahead
as he comes along. But let me just say, that there's two ways. Your question was, how does technology and AI add value, if you like, to organizations? And there's two ways, really. The one is, the common way is that it drives out cost. So we automate things. The idea of that is that human beings supposedly can do higher tasks, so that the boring, time-consuming, tedious tasks can be done by people analytics, by great platforms like OpenHR, and by AI, for example. So we're fairly familiar with those. The big debate that comes when you're talking about the driving out cost part of technology is, what happens to the employees? Are we going to find new jobs? And to be honest, it hasn't looked great so far. People always say that, you will be moved to higher work, but if you ask people in call centers and banks and supermarkets, where is the higher work? They're not seeing it yet, but nonetheless, for the people that are displaced, before I come to the revenue opportunities, there are career opportunities that Gen AI and AI bring. And it's quite interesting how few people are actually embracing Gen AI. I look at, colleagues, friends, etc. Very, very clever people, hey? Very clever. But they say, it is rubbish. It will never do this. It cannot do this task. It hallucinates. It makes mistakes. I said, yes, of course it makes mistakes and it hallucinates. But you are focusing on the 5% or 10% of bad things that it does. You are ignoring the 90% of incredible work that it can do. But you have to learn to do it, And I kid you not, I don't know about you, Jeff, but I spend at least 5 hours a day learning Gen AI. So I use it to run my calendar, my do lists, my business plan, all my projects. This, as you know, this webinar, formatting this webinar, everything goes through Gen AI for me. And it allows me to do so much more productivity. So in terms of driving out cost of the organization, even if it does cost you a job, you can use it to start your own company or to do incredible things. The other side of it is, how does people analytics, how do platforms like OpenHR and AI, how do they generate more revenue for the company? Well, I mean, there's one obvious part is that you can start training them to interact with your customers. And so you can start getting chatbots that are good at revenue. But you can also get them to help with innovation. People say, oh, well, that's where you're wrong, Max, because AI cannot create. That is the last thing that human beings will do, is the creativity. And I dispute that. I have managed to get AI to do such creative work by drawing information. So, for example, if I say I have a problem with, let's use Jeff's example of attrition, you've got a high attrition going there. I want a novel solution. I can read the usual textbook, page 320, where PwC or Josh Burson says you must do that, you must do that. But those are old solutions and employees know how to fight those. I say, how would a candle maker approach attrition? So I get a weird and wonderful new perspective. They will say, well, you want to work slowly at the people. Or I say, how would an engineer approach it? How would an artist approach? And you bring in, to me, the ability to bring in different domains, different subjects, to look at HR problems. That is creative. And in fact, I did that recently at an insurance company where they said they wanted to use AI to create more innovative processes. And I came back with a wonderful list of processes and say, wow, Max, we didn't know that you knew about insurance. I said, I don't. I really just asked the AI. I said, generate 100 solutions from completely different domains. So come at it like a chemical engineer, come at it like a musician, come at it like a retailer, come at it like a banker. And then I said, now rank and choose the best ones. And I ended up with a list. So whoever says to me, AI cannot be creative, I say it's because you do not know how to speak correctly to the AI. So I think that it provides, to answer your question, Adelia, I think it provides tremendous competitive edge to the company. And I think it provides tremendous competitive edge to the employees as well. I don't know, Jeff, if you...
Totally agree with everything you said. That's been my experience too. And you're absolutely spot on. This is about cost, radical cost reduction, not just within HR, but for the entire company, as well as creating revenue opportunities and commercial insight, strategic insight like you've never had before. We've been managing people, which is crazy, and has always ever driven me nuts about the HR profession. We've been managing the most expensive asset on our balance sheet. Somewhere between 75 and 80% of most balance sheets are the people costs, with zero level of insight as to whether or not these are the right people sitting in the right seats, doing the right things, and are prepared to deliver continuously, either on our current path. But let's face it, our paths are going to diverge all over the place from here on out, because the whole world of work is going to just undergo a massive transformation. There's going to be loads of consolidation, loads of M&A activity. There's going to be lots of meshing and radical collaborations across things. How do we know how best to do that? How best to undertake that in the most intelligent way to actually get as much competitive advantage from that as possible? Well, we need to then, kind of drive, for instance, a whole new layer of molecular data around people, which is, what skills do you have? What competencies do you have? What experiences do you come from? And what do you know? And then map all that kind of stuff through an AI mesh. And then, oh my gosh, you can query that a million different ways and get all sorts of exciting information around that. That is a moneymaker, man. That is not just about saving costs. That puts HR in a completely different, kind of viewpoint overall. And it's going to be tools like OpenHR as an example that are going to basically help us to kind of manage that information. Data hygiene is super important too, right? Gather as much as you can, but make sure it's accurate and make sure you fill it in so you can then create data lakes to pull from and make sense of. But no, Max, everything you talked about, mate, spot
Jeff,
on.
Just the interesting point. I created the CIPD's first people analytics course in around 2015. And I remember in fact, everything I wrote in 2015 is kind of starting to happen now, and some of it hasn't happened yet. And I look forward to it happening, I pray that it will happen in the next 10 years. Like, proper use of modeling and causal analysis,
Yes.
etc. And I thought it could have started immediately, but one of the questions I asked is, why are we so unscientific when it comes to looking at our workforce? So when we buy a machine, to create cell phones, we look at the market to see what are the right machines. How many cell phones will they produce per hour? What is the quality of the cell phone? That is like recruiting a machine, arguably. You're recruiting a new machine. But when it comes to employees, I don't know. We don't and we spend, as you say, 70, 80% of our revenue is often spent on employees. We don't have the same processes for recruiting. When it comes to programming that machine to make the cell phones, we have brilliant PhD engineers who can refine the process and make the wafers and the chips that go into it so thin. But when it comes to the most expensive thing, we may have an IO psychologist on board who can help predict which employee is going to do the best job, have the highest performance in doing whatever they're supposed to do, but we don't do it to the same extent. And I think one of the arguments, and I say this as a psychologist, one of the arguments, I'll be interested in your view, actually. I've always assumed that the argument is that people are different to the machines that make cell phones. For some reason, there's some ethical difference that you can't treat them the same, maybe. But also, they are not as predictable as that machine, maybe, that makes the cell phones. So I know that if I put so many raw materials into the machine, it will kick out so many phones. Whereas if I spend so much on the machine, let's say I spend $1 million on the machine, I know that it will generate $400 million of cell phones for me over the next 5 years. If I spend 100,000 or 200,000 on an employee and send them to do an MBA at INSEAD or Harvard or something, what return will I get from the employee? You see, when I pour money into the workforce, it's not as easy to predict as when I pour money into AI or hardware. This is why I think AI is very likely to take over from employees, not because it is better, but because it allows CEOs to predict what ROI. It's
predictability. Sure.
It's predictability. However, psychology and the ability to do the kind of analytics that you do, Jeff, as an expert, I mean, you're particularly expert at doing this. The kind of analytics that you do are bringing us closer to predicting, well, if we put an employee with these characteristics, this background, this education, and we spend 200 grand on an MBA or something for them, we are much closer to being able to predict. And if not for that one employee, at least for a group of 100 employees, if I spend $1 million on L&D this year, this is the kind of return that we can get that we could never do before Open HR came along and before AI came along. We could try and do it, but only spot. Now, those kinds of ROI calculations are becoming available. And that is what the C-suite and executive teams, I think, are looking for. If we can prove the value that human beings add, then executive suites will not get rid of human beings.
Indeed. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it brings up another topic, which I'm sorry, Dilly, we can dive into your question in a second, but this notion of how do we upskill and reskill our populations basically to make room for this new technology, which arguably in some cases can replace reasonably predictable and well-structured functions, like, for instance, sales development rep calls, cold calling, customer service call centers and things of that nature. Arguably, there's a case for AI to potentially enhance and frankly even replace, some of those very expensive functions in businesses. But when you're talking about knowledge workers, this is basically giving them a huge boost, but they have to learn how to engage with it. They really have to learn, how is this going to turn me from sort of a 1x player to a 5x player in terms of all the things you do? You listed a whole pile of things that you use AI for. Could you imagine if everybody in every organization was engaged with AI in that same way? It's clearly kind of Microsoft's vision with Copilot, right? Albeit it's a bit clunky, it's a bit small in its approach, but it will build and it will become ubiquitous, and it will be at our fingertips. We'll be walking down the hall, talk to our cell phones. Hey, do me a favor, create a training course on this, and do, just kind of ping a note to everybody who's a stakeholder, and have them input their information, and then whip it together in a matter of 2 hours. You have a globally delivered training course, right, that goes on. I mean, that's the kind of crazy stuff that I'm seeing happen right now. So it is it is an issue of how is it we're going to embrace this technology to understand, its limitations, and importantly, where it can enhance your behavior and your performance, and then basically figure out how to like coexist with it, and frankly, let it lift us up so that we can actually do that headier thinking. We're not worried about sort of the base level, kind of administration, compliance, governance garbage that frankly just is soul destroying, quite frankly, and what nobody signed up to.
Delia, can I respond to that, or are we pressed on time?
Go
ahead. Yeah. Jeff, if I look back at some of the projects that I've worked on over the years, I think how much more quickly and better quality I could have delivered if I had had these tools available to me
here
at the time. I did okay.
Totally.
Here I am. They're still paying me. They're still asking me to do work for them. But the quality of the work that I can produce, I have this survey that I use called the Human Capital Value Profiler, or the Value Profiler, which involves a whole bunch of employees filling in questions about the quality of their various processes. Processes is where you spend the money. Recruitment.
Yeah.
Learn. You don't spend the money on the outcome of the process, like the engagement or the leadership ability. You spend the money on recruiting the leader and training the leader. The outcome is the ability. You can only spend. And so I measure these things, and I look at their impact on the business outcomes, partly to help HR prove its value to the business in a sense. But it was always quite a long process. I did it with Dave Milner. I think you may know Dave.
Yeah, sure.
And this you had to go through, you had to get the responses from, maybe 1,000 employees, plus all the comments, the qualitative input, and analyzing that to see, do the comments match the ratings, etc. Now it says to you, right, the process that's causing the most problem in your organization is career development. Then you have to look through the comments and say, right, can the process design you a new career development process that will give you the business outcome, revenue or profitability that you are looking for? You see, and that would take us maybe a month and a half to analyze that one. I've just built in this last week, and I'm presenting it in Norway in a couple of weeks for the first time. I built a Gen AI bot. I've called it HCVP bot, Human Capital Value Profiler bot.
Oh, I see. Right.
In Claude. And all it says is, please give me the input file, the Excel file with all the ratings from the employee, the survey file. Tell me what is the business outcome that they want to improve, productivity, innovation, whatever. And it analyzes the entire thing, comes up with a report, comes up with a new process, which it identifies which process needs to fix. So if let's say that they say we want to fix revenue, it will look at which processes people are letting you down when it comes to revenue. It will tell you how to fix the process. You can input your process, but you can look at the employee comments on the problems. It will then create a new process from those, and it will deliver you that as their. That would have taken me 2 or 3 months to get the whole thing together. Now I press a button. Wow.
This is the magic of it. It's absolutely the magic of it, Max. Yeah. And it's not like you went and programmed your own bot from scratch.
I wrote it in.
You know what I mean? Said, you provided it context.
Look at this, do that. Now look at which you could describe it. I'm still getting my head around how amazing it is.
Agreed.
I hope today's audience gets the sense of excitement about.
Yeah, I hope that as well, because I'm getting also excited. Like, wow, it's really. I learn a lot also from you and from your excitement. Like, this is really interesting. And also, I wanted to ask a question that changed a little bit the topic, but it's also a topic that is asking the audience is asking in the comments, and it's that. Well, before the webinar, I asked quite different HR professionals who have reservation about fully embracing AI in the field of human resources, right? So I would like to hear about your perspective on these concerns. So, for example, one key question is how HR professionals effectively balance AI driven insight, with human judgment to ensure ethical practices.
Tell you what, Max, why don't you take this one to start, because you've had a
Sure.
lot of experience with that combination, and I'll
Yeah,
pick
yeah.
up at the end.
You
Yeah.
know, Adelia, the answer is it has to be a conscious choice to say that we are going to combine the human in. If you use the AI only, then what you do is you end up with a solution that is okay, but it is not perfect. You'll notice when I described the HCVP, Human Capital Value Profiler process, I said you ask the humans for comments and for questions to do it. I could have done it without those, but you get a much higher quality in 2024 and probably 2025 by including the human being. When the machines take over in a couple of years, all bets are off. I cannot guarantee. So,
Indeed.
But the answer at the moment is certainly that you have to consciously build into your AI to say, ask the human, ask the user. Maybe you say the human, it sounds a little bit bad. Ask the user for what their view is and give them different perspectives. So the final choice, Adelia, I think, and whoever asked the question, the final choice must be made by the user and not by the AI. Now, it is possible to program the AI to give you the answer, but you'll get a much better quality answer if you ask the AI to say, here are the options, generate lots of options. Human, which one would you like to choose? So that is the idea. There is about using AI not as a question and answer machine, but as a conversational tool. So if you say, I'm not just going to ask it, how must I change the process, or how do I fix attrition? You say, we are having a problem with attrition. What are the 4 best approaches for doing it? Not how do I fix attrition? So that would be my view, is you consciously have to program the AI not to exclude human beings, I think.
Very good point, Max. Yeah, spot on. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking about the way that I've seen AI used in a variety of different contexts with HR technology, and especially around things like employee engagement surveys, as an example. Right? There's a lot of stuff you typically get from that. You can ask a lot of multiple choice questions. You get a bunch of data there, but then you ask also for comments, and you typically will get lots of interesting comments for each of the 60 questions that you asked. But then you'll also have some open-ended kind of text stuff saying, hey, how can we do stuff better? How can, what would you like to see changed here? Do you feel like you're being fulfilled from a career perspective? I mean, pretty heady topics, and people sometimes pour their hearts out there. How do you grab that kind of data and actually make sense of it in a way that says, make it, positive or negative initially, try to kind of separate it out so we can then kind of like further parse it. But importantly, to your point, don't be afraid to ask AI to say, hey, help me make sense of all of this stuff and give me a sense for, where we come out relative to, being, the company that we desire to be versus the company that we actually are today. And let's then kind of deep dive into each one of those critical areas. And I would love from you, to understand what kinds of thoughts, suggestions, programs, or interventions would make sense for us to pursue in terms of this. And can you prioritize that for me based on, how it is these things have been rated and ranked, and based on the quality or detail included in the comments? It's amazing, right? I mean, AI goes right to town on it. It might not be perfect, but good God, it accelerates your thinking literally tenfold, so that's another great use case. But you're absolutely spot on. Giving AI, if you really want to use the power of it, give it hard problems to solve, right?
Yeah.
But give it context, give it a role, and then basically walk it through what it is you're wanting from it.
Don't just ask it the question. Never say to AI, solve this problem for me.
No.
Because all it will do is it will look at the textbook most common way, and which may or may not be the right way. The best way, if you want to solve a problem, say, give me 4 completely different approaches to solving the problem. You know what I said earlier about, solve it like you're an artist, solve it like you're a musician, but you don't have to specify. Just say, give me 4 completely different ways. And in that way, Jeff, what you say, 100%, you will get a discussion tool which allows the human being, not the AI, to be the genius in the process.
And it's not replacing you. It's just helping lift and shift what is otherwise a big cognitive load.
You got
what I mean? Exactly.
You got a free coach, or whatever you pay for the AI, which is cheap.
Yeah, at the moment.
Much cheaper than a live.
Wait for it.
Funnily enough, I have a coaching client, Nicole, who I've been on at her for a long time. Nicole, I don't know if you're on one of the participants here today. If she was, it would be quite fun to have Nicole share her perspective. But I've been on at her since day one, pushing her to start using Claude. I'm a very keen Anthropic
Claude is nice.
Claude's fantastic. It's just head and shoulders at the moment. These things change. And she came to it. She's busy, very busy lady with her job, etc. And in a sense, I don't want to talk myself out of a coaching role and get Claude to do all the coaching, etc. But nonetheless, she started embracing it. And what I've noticed is that the level of issues that she brings back are much higher, because by the time she comes to discuss it with me, she's covered all the basic stuff. So when she gets to me, it's the hard questions that the AI has not been able to answer satisfactorily, and she still, luckily for me, needs a human being to give an answer. And that is the way to use AI. It's not replacing human thought, it is working with human thought.
Yeah, you're spot on. And I think what's fascinating about this, and then I'll kick it back to you, Adelia. What I think what's exciting about it is exactly what you just said, Max. It's really kind of a powerful statement. It's a very powerful statement, which is we spend so much time under the weight of the cognitive load of engaging with very inefficient speech processes, trying to kind of engage with other people and to kind of get through all the basics, right? And then evaluate, various layers of your onion, if you will. But the person that you're trying to help and support is desperate for you to get to the center of their onion and say, this is the core problem. Here's the root cause. Let's start solving for this now. Yeah, it's complicated. Yeah, it's difficult. You use tools like AI, and immediately it starts making sense of chaos and really starts to put things in a context, especially if you give it clever instructions. And you don't have to be a genius to do it. It's a natural language, kind of tool that all you need to do is to have a very simple format. Just tell it what role you want to play. Practice, have fun with it. Importantly, you can even ask AI to say, help me make my prompt better. Do you know what I mean? Help me clarify what it is I'm trying to kind of like. Ask me 5-10 questions, and I'll give you the answers to that. And when you do that, the AI is like, hey, that's great. Now I can zoom out there and come straight back to you with a much more fulsome response, right? And so it's, and you can imagine, HR is sat on a mountain of data. OpenHR in particular, right, is a wonderful kind of human capital management tool. That basically kind of just gathers all sorts of fascinating data, including performance data and recruitment data, and all sorts of core, demographic data on individuals. But what do you do with that, right? If you just click on reports and you're like, tell me what the salaries were for the past 2 years and what the percentage change was between male and female, participants. Okay, great. You get 2-dimensional data, and it's boring, and it doesn't scream a story. But if you kind of pump stuff into AI, and of course you have to do that in a very anonymized way if you're using external learning management models. But you do that with them and say, tell me a story about how it is over the course of the entire history of the organization. How have we paid males versus females in this organization, broken down by job types or by departments or by divisions or by, level of manager, whatever it is you want to know. And once you kind of get that core data, then say, great, do me a favor now, go back and interrogate the data and help us understand, are there any patterns that you see emerging that basically say, we do this seemingly knowingly, you know what I mean? That for whatever reason, females are getting paid on average 25% lower than the males in this organization. What would we then go do? What suggestions might you have, AI, in terms of ways in which we can undertake a program to fix this over the course of the next 12 to 18 months? And what steps do you think are rational to take and so forth? This is the kind of fun you can have with that. All of that can get done in 30 minutes which would otherwise take us months, potentially even years to go solve for. But this is the kind of stuff that AI can do for us. It's super exciting.
Yeah,
100%.
this is amazing. Seriously. Now I'm going to step up to the Q&A because we have a couple of questions from the audience. So the first one is from Mohammed, and he says, presume that HR uses AI for transactional HR processes so that HR professional utilizes more time towards strategic HR functions. What about functions that involves emotional intelligence?
Good question.
Well, Matt, it's good job. You have a psychologist here.
You know,
what are your thoughts? It's really important, though. What are your thoughts on it, Max?
It's how you see when Gen AI started, we saw it as a text-based tool. And then suddenly we saw that we could start doing image work and entering images. So now it was operating in two modes: a text mode and a video and an image mode. Then we started getting this audio mode. And there's a very strong belief from experts in the field that it will soon be programmed to have an emotional mode as well. So you will be able to detect emotions. And in fact, I believe that OpenAI has already released something which allows it to detect in situations what are the emotions going on in a conversation. Certainly in call centers, we are already seeing emotional analysis. So I see emotions as being another mode, like writing, like video, like images, like audio, etc. I have no doubt that within, let me put a number, 4 years, 3 or 4 years, emotional intelligence and handling will be standard. You know, I asked a friend of mine who has EBI, an emotional intelligence questionnaire, when they were going to start creating emotional intelligence tests for AI. And I'm still looking forward to seeing that, because I think we will start, you know, we already have IQ tests for Gen AI. I think it's not going to be long before we have emotional intelligence tests as well.
Great.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, and I'll just throw my 2 cents in there too. Look, I mean, it's fascinating what they are programming into these tools, and sometimes it's a bit of an overreach at the moment, and it does feel a bit silly. I'll give you a quick example. My father is looking to come and visit me from the States over here in the UK next year. And he was asking, geez, what other airlines operate out of Heathrow other than BA, British Airways? Because we're looking to kind of take some follow-on trips, after visiting you and go across Europe. And I was like, what do I know about this? Honestly, I'm not a travel agent. Am I really? So just for fun, I fed it into, actually, I spoke it into my instance of GPT-4o on my phone. And it came back with, very, very sensible response, and actually a very accurate response, which was great. But then as I was then carrying out a conversation with my youngest son thereafter, it picked up on the conversation, and it basically came back and said, hey, seems like there's a little playful energy here. Who's Tony, by the way? Sounds like a fun chat. I was like, what? It's cool. Like my, you know what I mean? Like my AI is now wanting to kind of chat with me and have a, so look, I mean, it's going to mimic, right, for a while. There's going to be an imitation lag, and it's going to sound a bit funny and stilted and so forth. But good God, it will learn. That's the whole power behind these models, is that they have this neural learning network capability and transformer capability, which is the bit, quite frankly, that has a lot of computer folks a bit nervous and a bit scared, because nobody can really understand what happens in that layer of AI. But it compares and contrasts at the speed of light and immediately comes back with its best possible analysis based on the information it's been trained on. The more it listens to us, the more it works with us, the smarter it will get about these sorts of things. Will it ever replace that? Probably not. And do I, frankly, if I have a problem and I'm really upset about something, do I want to go talk to a computer about it? I don't know. I guess it depends on the kind of. I think that's always ever going to be a super important part of our,
Can I just say, to your point about It's going to sound a bit stilted, or whatever the good word you was. It's not going to sound natural when it's talking about emotions, etc. Jeff,
Right.
We've all had a manager who's got terrible emotional intelligence, and
Fair point.
you know, and they sound really stilted when they say trying to be empathy. They can't say it,
Empathetic.
you know, empathetic.
Yeah, no, it's horrible.
They can't
Right,
say
right,
empathetic.
right.
So they are posing and pretending. You know, in many instances, AI can probably do a better job at faking it than your managers have in the past. So when you know,
Fair
to the
point.
question, you know, will AI be able to handle it? Say, well, not perfectly, but probably better than many managers that you've had in your lifetime.
Indeed. Yeah, fair point, Max.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to read another question, and I think with this one it's good. Okay. So Raja says, "Do you think are the top what do you think are the top 3 key differences in impact potential between traditional analytics, / machine learning, and generative AI within domain of HR?"
You want me to go for that
Wow.
one
Yeah, go ahead.
initially?
Yeah. Try to make sense of that one
Okay,
for
so
us quick.
right now, my colleague Jennifer Deal at USC, University of Southern California, she loves putting logic problems into Gen AI just to prove to me that it is really bad at solving mathematical. She will ask about, you know, Pythagoras' theorem, or you know, there are 5 girls on a campsite. Mary from California has a yellow jersey, and da da da. Then it has to work out which one is which, and it always gets it wrong. Well, again, that's 2024. That's where we are now. Remember, Gen AI is not designed to be a problem solver. Gen AI is a sentence completer. We can't go into the whole history of, you know, what Gen AI is here, but let me just say it is not currently designed to solve problems, but increasingly, like the new version of ChatGPT 01, that is designed as a logical tool solver. And you'll note how slow it is, by the way, those of you that have tried it. The difference between those tools and the traditional machine learning and statistical technology tools is they are custom built. They can only do one task, and they do it very well. Gen AI can do multiple tasks, but there are certain tasks that it cannot do as well, like those technologies that you're talking about and the statistical analyses. However, I have every confidence that it will soon, very soon, be able to do the logical stuff as well as that. So you will not need R or Python in the future. Everything you need to do, you will be able to do on Gen AI. Again, I would say within 3 years.
Yeah, fair point. But possibly even sooner, right? Like the release of Strawberry.
Even sooner. I always like to leave it because people say it's impossible. But, you know,
I know,
in my
right?
heart,
Then suddenly,
I think it is sooner. Yes.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, well, Strawberry's coming out, right? Which is another iteration,
Exactly.
if you will, of ChatGPT, and it's basically specifically, you know, kind of meant to be solving logic problems much more accurately, which is fascinating. And of course, once one solves it, then of course those models will get around, and people will start to unpick each other's capabilities, and then off we go. What I love about the use of AI versus the typical use of machine learning tools like Python and R and things of that nature, in terms of trying to kind of distill and understand human behavior in the context of a company's business and make sense of it all, is the fact that AI adds color, in my view, and dimensions to the data, which in my estimation is wonderful, because that's what I've always ever looked for. I don't want to stare at a spreadsheet until my forehead bleeds, trying desperately to kind of make sense of what is it I'm staring at here? What is it telling me? Why does this matter? Who else needs to know about this? Where can I get more information and dig deeper on this? That's the kind of stuff you can play with in AI. So you just upload the spreadsheet and say, hey, here's what it is I'm trying to solve for. Here are some examples of what outputs I'm looking for. Can you do me a favor and just give me whatever it is, 5, 10 different kinds of approaches to it, and provide a description. Make a simple table. Do this, do that, and then it's amazing. It's like there you go. It's all there for you. So AI gives things color, it gives things dimension, it gives things a sense of multiple shapes, and it gives you options to go and further interrogate, the responses it's already given you. And that to me is something that just saves loads of time, effort, and money, quite frankly. So I think it's a terrific use case.
Yeah.
Great. Well, guys, this has been really interesting. I think we could talk about this for hours. But
Indeed.
unfortunately, we need to wrap up this webinar today. I want to say thank you very much for sharing your expertise with everyone. We've learned a lot. At least myself, I've learned a lot. I'm sure our audience has gained a lot of valuable insights from this. And I also want to say thank you to everyone who joined us today. We hope you find this session very helpful and inspiring. And also, as a reminder, this webinar is recording and it will be sent to you shortly. So please do not forget to check out our upcoming webinars and resources on the OpenHR website. So I hope everyone has a great day. Also, the weekend is just around the corner, and also to have a great weekend. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Adelia.
Thank you,
Lovely
everybody.
to see
Take
you.
care.
Great
Thank
chat.
you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Cheers, everybody.